My ancestor who came here was Stephen H. Ludlow, and he came in 1836, soon after the Ingham County was surveyed. The first person in this country came in 1647, and he was born in Matlock, Derbyshire, England. His father was a miller. He was a miller with him, and in the 1640s, there was a civil war, the big civil war in England that encompassed almost the whole country. The Royalists, and the parliamentarians were fighting each other. I'm talking about war, real war. And much of it centered on the Midlands, which is where Derbyshire is, because Charles I left London and went to Nottinghamshire, which is right next door. The royals had people here, the parliamentarians had people here, and that part in the middle where they were some and some is where a lot of the fighting took place. But it took place all over the country. And by 1645, they had destroyed crops, greens, cattle. The royalists especially would go through and just burn everything, tear through it, and just destroy it. And so by 1645, William Ludlow had 8 children. He was about 40 years old, working for his father, or with his father. His mother died in 1645. His wife died in childbirth with the 8th child in 1646. And I think it's 1647 when he left, because there he is, a widower with many small children. Well, some were teenagers. And the mill was obviously in trouble because it was a grist mill, and everything was destroyed. I think there might have been some political differences with his father, too. I found some evidence of that. He left for Long Island. One of the reasons he came to Long Island is because his brother-in-law, his wife's brother, had already come to Long Island a couple of years before that, and they were setting up a new settlement there. So this is 25, 26, 27 years after the Mayflower that these people were coming to Long Island. We have records on quite a few of them. I have a little tiny map that I copied out from something in the Burton collection that identified the people and where they lived. 2 or 3 houses here, 2 or 3 houses here. And William, our William, Ludlam, Ludlam at that time, was the miller who came to join that settlement at his brother-in-law's invitation. He lived there for the rest of his life. He was, within a few years, all of his children came, except one, from England, and joined him there. I don't know that he ever remarried. He died in 1665. His will was the first will filed in New York, because there was no New York or no New York City until that time. That was the year New York City became a town and became the seat of places you filed wills. And we do have his will. In other words, he was a pioneer in early Southampton, is where they were. And the children for the next 4 generations lived in Southampton, East Hampton, West Hampton, Bridgehampton, but they all of the Henrys all the way down the line were the Millers. In 1791, one of the Henrys and his brother Silas left Long Island and came to upstate New York. I can't imagine the journey. I just can't imagine that. When Henry and Silas, brothers, and the son of Henry came in 1791, Thomas, the son, and Julia, his wife, had with them their firstborn son, 1789. And they traveled, and a lot of them came. A lot of the families came, of the family came. But they traveled from Long Island to upstate New York, across, the roads were cut then. They didn't have easy travels. They had to hack their way through. They were coming into an area that had been the Iroquois nation until very shortly before that. And they came to Standing Stone in Pennsylvania. And Julia says in her diary, "We left Standing Stone and came to the head of the lake. And the head of the lake is Cayuga Lake. And they were headed for 6 miles up the lake to nothing, a place where they had bought a lot." The military tract, after the Revolutionary War, was taken violently from the Indians to be the bounty land for the Revolutionary War soldiers, awards for good service. The military tract was 1,800,000 acres in the Finger Lakes area. It was surveyed into 28 townships of 60,000 acres each, and then 100 lots of 600 acres each in each township. So when Henry and Silas took a lot, they got 600 acres. And that's a hunk of property. They went up the river, the Salmon Creek, it was a river, about a mile, where there were some good falls. This is the Salmon Creek Falls. And so they knew they had water power. They knew they could build a mill there. They're still millers. And they settled there. Other people joined them pretty soon. After a few years, it becomes, Ludlow Town, and then after a while, Ludlowville. And it still is Ludlowville today. Other people came in, and they are names that come to Michigan. I'll give you some of those names later. But the person who had the military tract surveyed was Governor DeWitt Clinton. Should be a familiar name here. Surveyor was his sister's son. I don't know, his name is DeWitt, but I don't know what his last name was. The person who was granting the military land, the bounty land, was John Lansing. He was Secretary General to General Schuyler, State Controller, and was in charge of granting the lands. The servicemen had to go in person to his house in Troy to make their case for having the land. His house was still standing in 1953. I don't know. I haven't checked it later.